We're really excited today to have Judith Jones, fabulous editor and author, be with us today. She's going to share with you her latest cookbook, The Pleasures of Cooking for One, and then you can ask her any question you might have on your mind. So please give her a welcome.
Well, maybe I will sit. Just take a little water with me. On one of these. Got it. Point of honor. Get in my high chair. Well, you might all ask, why a book on cooking for one? Some people just get a glazed look in their eyes and say, all that fuss just for me? I don't want to do that. But I think there are many, many others who realize that it's more than just cutting down recipes. It's a whole strategy that you've got to make work for yourself. And once you have it in hand, I think you'll find that just going home at the end of the day and lighting the stove and getting the garlic sizzling and filling the house with good smells, that there's something so satisfying about it. And I talked a little bit about, in my memoir, The 10th Muse, about this at the end of the book after my husband died, because I felt I'm not going to want to do it just myself. It's going to be depressing and too many memories. And he was a great cook, and we cooked together. But I found it was quite the opposite. I found that by honoring myself and making a ritual of a nice dinner every night, lighting the candles, turning on some music, giving thanks, that something in me responded to this. And I think you'll really find that so. That's what I want to try to convey. There have been a number of books about cooking for one, but mostly they're just a reduced recipe. And as I say, it's strategy. In the first place, you don't think one dish at a time. You think of one dish leading to another. It's a rhythm through the week. Think how many times you're going to be home. And if you bought that little tenderloin of pork, how many times would you use it in quite different ways so you're not eating cold pork all week? And all meats and fish lend themselves to flavoring in different ways, so they don't taste the same on the second round or the third round. Note, I don't use leftovers, because the word leftovers, because that puts people off. Second round, third round, reincarnation. So I think that is kind of the attitude to have. And so you think through the week, and you try to keep things varied. If you have just that extra little piece of meat on your plate, and you really don't want it, incorporate it in a nice little salad you're making for lunch the next day to take to work. Now, you don't have to, because you have a wonderful cafeteria, but I can tell you the Knopf cafeteria makes you want to bring your own lunch. So I almost invariably do, and that's not going out, and that's part of it too. And in a curious way, you don't overstuff that, because you eat what you want, and you put the other thing aside, already beginning to think of, what am I going to do with that? My children used to laugh at me and say, "You're no sooner, you and Evan are no sooner finished one meal than you're thinking of the next." Well, it leads to that, because it is a very creative pleasure. It isn't just following slavishly a recipe, but looking in the fridge, seeing what you have in your freezer, what needs using up, what combinations would be good, and then really creating something out of those little tidbits. I call them gold in the refrigerator, because it's like having treasure. You learn ways not to waste. Now, for instance, you have to get a whole box of mushrooms. You don't want to eat mushrooms 3 times or 4 times in 1 week. So after the second or third day, and they're beginning to look a little droopy, chop them up, do them in a small pan with some butter, just enough to get the juice out of them, and then put them in a little plastic bag, sealed. And there you have what the French call mushroom duxelle. And you can take a little, break off a piece and put it in a soup, you can put it in an omelet, anything that needs seasoning. So your imagination starts going. That's part of it. And then I think having some things, basic things on hand. When I make a tomato sauce, I make probably 3 times as much as I need and put it in small containers. Same with the cream sauce. I've devised a way now of when I have a chicken stock, or even if it's a canned stock, you open it and maybe use a half a cup in your sauce, and the rest goes to waste. Put it in an ice tray, and then let it freeze, and then break up the cubes and put them in little plastic containers. And that way you can just pull out 1 cube and plop it into your frying pan, make a little pan sauce. So I'm having fun as I'm doing this, because it gets your mind sort of spinning. If you make a dreadful mistake, you have only yourself to... You eat it anyway. So what if the sauce curdled? And you learn something from it, so that next time you're a little more careful with the flame, or you don't put ice cold milk in, and it's that kind of thing. Also, the other positive things are that it's much less expensive. You can buy a whole little chicken, and you use it probably in 5 or 6 ways. I always go in and get the packet of giblets, because I love a chicken liver, and make a little shirred egg and chicken liver lunch for myself. Then there's the neck and the giblets, and if I either freeze them until I have a big pot of them, or if I need just a little bit of broth, put that in a pot and boil it up. And then you have some cold chicken for lunch, and then you can make some of those wonderful old-fashioned dishes, I think of them. One is just minced chicken on toast with nice flavors in it, some cream and maybe some Madeira and some shallots and little herbs. And it's so simple. Or you can have fun and make yourself, I remember there was a restaurant called Chicken Divan. No, the restaurant was called the Divan when I was growing up. And one of their specialties was a chicken divan, which was broccoli on the bottom of a dish, and then a lovely cream sauce and the chicken and Parmesan cheese, and baked all together. And that's very easy to make. If you've got a piece of leftover chicken and your cream sauce is in the fridge, you have that ready in 10 minutes, and then bake it. So that is a large part of the fun, too, of feeling, well, I've probably spent half of what my neighbor's spending with that takeout that she's eating. And also, and I think this is a very important factor, we're much more aware today of where our food comes from, and we care about it. And we can take that little extra to buy something organic, and we don't have to eat things that we don't know what's in them, all those ersatz products and corn oil and stuff like that. We're in charge of what we're eating, and that gives you a very, very good feeling. And it's fun to go to farmers markets and to stop at some of the little stands all through Manhattan, get to know, they see me coming and they say, oh, you want your blueberries and or my bananas. And supermarkets have become so lifeless. Nobody talks to you. I mean, you don't have that connection. So it's nice to cultivate that and feel, even when you're in New York, that you are in touch with the things of the earth, even when you're up on the 9th floor. And so those are all some of the pleasures that I find. And in doing this book, I wanted to make it very personal. I think that when you're in the kitchen, particularly a young person starting out for the first time, and most of us haven't learned at grandma's knee the way we used to in the past. And so you need to feel somebody's there with you. And so I wanted that sense of a voice in the kitchen. And we don't have to be so compulsively fussy. We've gone too far in that direction. I mean, recipes talk about, in a bowl, combine the first mixture with the second mixture. Why not call things what they are? The first time I came upon that, I thought, what's my mixture? And I looked, and up in the first paragraph, step 1, 2, 3, 4, you don't cook that way, I saw that the milk had been heated with a little sugar. So that becomes the first mixture. I mean, I want to bring back into cookbooks that sense of there's a person there who's loving what she's doing and wants to share it with you, and you can talk back to her if it doesn't work. And so we had a lot of fun putting this together. And when we were thinking about the cover, unfortunately, I'm an editor at Knopf and also published by them, so that I'm right on the inside of things and can have a say in what the cover should look like in the design. But I was having lunch across the street at a new restaurant that had opened, and it had cheese souffle. You don't see that very often. 25-minute wait, but I had a chatty author with me, and 25 minutes flew. And in came this perfect little, for one, souffle. It was delicious. I was so excited by it. I said, that's the cover. Because to me it expresses everything I want to say, that pleasing yourself, making something that's good to look at, delicious to eat, putting to use some of these principles of, the cream sauce that I needed was right in the freezer. And so we put that on the cover. And then the young designer asked what this background material was. I said, well, it's just a kitchen towel I have. She said, bring it in. And so we have to get rid of this and this. So she took the towel and used it for the all this ancillary material. I'm telling you about how to use up your cheeses, how to buy them, how to keep them, how to use up milk, because you have to get a whole quart of milk when all you want is half a pint. Incidentally, I think I'm going to start a movement called Remember the Solos, or Remember the Single Cook, or something like that. And I once talked to a supermarket, and I said, why don't you just think of that single cook? And you could have a sticker on the outside of your store saying, we cater to singles. I said, you'd be inundated. But they don't talk. They'd rather have us waste food. So you do buy too much, and so you have to think another way. But to go back to this book, I also wanted to kind of tell a few stories, because I think there's always a story in a recipe. It's always where it came from. And I'll just read you one of these, because once when I was up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, working all day, nonstop with Julia Child, as we often did, it was almost 11 p.m. when she finally swept away the manuscript and announced, we'll make dinner. Then she turned to me and said, Judith, you make a nice little potato dish while I fix the meat. Slightly unnerved, I managed to give rise to the occasion and put together what I would call a fast stovetop version of the classic potatoes Anna. As I mashed some garlic and salt together and smeared this between the layers of the sliced potatoes, Julia was looking on a bit skeptically. And although I used lots of butter, of which she always approved, it wasn't clarified butter. But when we sat down and she took her first bite, she pronounced the potatoes delicious. And her husband, Paul, toasted me. I was in cook's heaven. So it's interspersed with stories, because I think that way you get to know the person who's guiding you. And I guess that gives you a sort of feeling of the book and the impulse behind it. And I just hope you'll all have fun with it. But have you got some questions? Oh, you must have some questions.
Hi there. Thank you so much for coming, especially given the weather. But I was wondering if, in general, I've been told that sometimes if you want to cook for one and take a recipe that was designed for four, that you really can't just quarter it. Is that true?
I'm not following that too well.
If I wanted to take a recipe that was designed for more than one person and make it for one, can I just half it or quarter it, or are there some things that don't translate?
Yes, if you remember to half and quarter the pan, too. You see what I mean? I remember I did one of Lydia Bastianich's dishes, and I told her about it. And she said, oh, but that wouldn't be any good for one, because you wouldn't, all the liquid would boil away. Well, I did it in a small one-portion pan, and the liquid didn't all disappear. You have to adjust just a little bit, watch it. And I kind of keep notes. But that's the basic principle, to use the right side utensil for the recipe you're cutting down.
Thank you.
Yes. Hi, I just wanted to know if you had like a favorite recipe, or is there something in particular that you really enjoy cooking?
A favorite recipe?
Yeah, favorite recipe in your book. Do you really like cooking fish versus chicken, and do you have a favorite recipe?
Well, I really only did recipes that I love. And it's hard to say a favorite. For one thing, I'm always working with new authors, and I learn from them, so I want to experiment with that. And right now, the recipes I love the most are ones I'm doing of Madhur Jaffrey, who has a book coming in the fall on Indian cooking, that she's really simplified so that it's much easier for you and me to do it. Having said that, I do sometimes get a yen for something. And this happened with popovers. And I thought, I can't make a whole pan full of popovers. They don't keep. I mean, they collapse after you have to eat them hot from the oven. And then I remembered this popover pan that has separate units so that they don't steam, but the air in the oven circulates. And so I got myself those popover pans, and I cut down the recipe so that I think I made just 2. And that was so exciting, just the taste of that popover and memories of childhood. I think we're very attached to things we ate as children. And I learned another trick, that if you cut a slice in them so they do deflate, at least they aren't soggy, and you can warm the second or the leftover one in the oven the next day. And it's pretty good. So you constantly find a way, and you feel so proud of yourself.
Thank you for coming. I would just love to hear a little bit about your history and your journey and kind of where you are today versus, kind of how you fell in love with cooking, and a little bit about that. That'd be great.
I will. It's kind of all in the first book, The 10th Muse, My Life in Food. So I didn't repeat that here, but I don't know. I think I was born with the right genes. I always just loved gravitating to the kitchen and watching our cook Edie with a big ceramic bowl and a wooden spoon. I can still hear the plop of that cake batter as she beat it in the big bowl. And now I would ask her questions about what she ate what she served her boyfriend over the weekend when she went back to Harlem. And I mean, there seemed a whole world out there because our cooking was pretty good, straightforward, plain English cooking. No garlic. So, but I just had this in my genes. I loved to cook for my dog when I was a little girl, too. This was before we had canned dog food. And so I pursued this and went to Paris when I was 24 years old, just on a summer holiday because I wanted France above all. And I stayed, instead of 3 weeks, I stayed for 3.5 years. And that's a whole story in itself. But I tried different things. I even had a French boyfriend who helped us run a little restaurant in the Countess's apartment and had all kinds of adventures. But most of all, what I learned was how food is such a part of French life and what a good time they have with it. Now they talk about it and take the whole family to the market and go to the charcuterie for this and the pâtisserie for this and the boulanger for this. And the time is time spent on something they love. So that it was a revelation to me. And when I came back, which was 1951, it seemed sort of a wasteland here. I mean, we didn't have even fresh mushrooms, fresh herbs in our supermarkets. And the garlic you could get came in a little box, little desiccated cloves, as though it mustn't touch anything else. And I just found it hard. And there wasn't a book that really taught me. I had learned from asking questions and trial and error. But I really wanted to get into it and preserve those good French dishes. And fortunately, I had just been about a year at Knopf then. I was working mostly on French translations. And along came this huge tome, which turned out to be Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And it was as though it had been written for me. I felt it was just an answer to my prayers. Here it was, all of it. So I had to convince Knopf. But fortunately, old Mr. Knopf was he was a wine and food society kind of food connoisseur. Never go in the kitchen, but you appreciate from outside. And I think he just finally ended up, well, let Mrs. Jones have her chance. And it was, the rest is history. Julia got on. I mean, the book was very, very well received, but it was when she got on television, and she was such a natural. And I think she just awakened America to the pleasures of cooking and to get rid of all that sort of Puritan ethic and enjoy slapping the little chicken. Somebody asked her why she massaged the chicken, and she said, well, I think he likes it. And she's so spontaneous and fun. And it was magical. It just caught fire. And isn't it interesting that with this film, Julie and Julia, it's catching fire again. We have sold so many copies of Mastering the Art since that movie came out. So good things happen. You just wait long enough. But I felt if Julia does this for French cooking, I want to find somebody who can teach us Middle Eastern cooking, Chinese cooking, Spanish cooking, Indian cooking. So I really went in search of new writers who, and very often they were women who had to leave their homeland when they were young and were deeply attached to the roots, wanted that connection through food, and wrote so beautifully about it. And so that's how it all developed. And I could go on and on, but that's enough of an outline at least. here's.
Can you talk a little bit more about your relationship with Julia Child and some more interesting stories?
About my relationship with her, or
Yeah.
my working with her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because probably most of you have seen Julie and Julia, and I think Meryl Streep gives a wonderful portrayal of that lust for life and the pleasure and all of that, and the very, very intimate and supportive relationship with Paul, her husband. But I think there's one thing missing, and that is that Julia was absolutely dedicated to making Americans cook better. And she came back from France with this mission, and nothing would stop her. The book was turned down by the publisher in Boston that had taken an option on it, and instead of just boo-hooing about it and saying, "Oh well, I'm no good," it just fired her determination to get this message across and not to compromise it. And little things like, I remember I asked her once, we were doing a cassoulet for the second volume of Mastering, and I said, I can't find a real garlic sausage, that it was pretty much the American bland kind of sausage and that you could get. And I said, could you give a little formula for it? And people will make their own. Why not? Good idea, said Julia. Well, I went up to Cambridge and walked into her kitchen. She had posted on a whole wall her findings, going back to old charcuterie manuals and trying the different proportions. And finally, at the end, was her version. And she said, this is it, or something like that. I said, Julia. And she said, it wasn't hard, it's just like making a hamburger. But that's absolute dedication. And she wasn't so averse to change, but she was very particular about whether the Cuisinart would really do this or this, and you mustn't put potatoes in it because they turn to glue. But you can make beautiful things of purees and I always used to come home and buy a new piece of equipment after I'd been up visiting Julia. So she had that chance. When she said to me that, Judith, you and I were born at the right time, yes, but she acted on it, and it was very much a force of personality.
So, what was your reaction when you heard that Julie Powell was, excuse me, cooking through Mastering the Art of French Cooking, strictly in order, all within a year? Did that seem adventurous?
Mm-hmm.
Did it seem a little daft? Were you perhaps inspired to try it yourself with some other book? Anything like that?
Well, my reaction was, first, somebody told me about it, and I wanted to see what she was doing. And if you've seen the movie, it's a movie version. But I was going to go out and see her and also talk about rights and using Julia's recipes and just things like that. I mean, sort of a business trip. And Julia was on the West Coast, and she said, well, we better look at the blog. So we looked at the blog, and we both decided that it wasn't anything Julia should have anything to do with. Principally because I think Julia felt you can't be serious talking about food when you have a vocabulary of 4-letter words to describe things. And that was about what it was. So we just thought, let her have her blog, but let's stay away from it. So that I called up and canceled the dinner party, and or didn't come to the dinner party. But I think it's understandable. A lot of people come away from that and think, why was Julia so mean to Julie? Julia was not mean to. She was the most supportive and generous person, but you had to be a serious cook. She talked She had a word for those who weren't, and she called them the flimsies. Well, I think she just didn't take Julie seriously. Does that answer pretty much the question? Yeah. I have to be careful saying this, and I'm not trying to demean Julie. She had her own agenda, but they were kind of worlds apart. Also, I think that I give credit to Nora Ephron because I think she had a wonderful concept in putting this movie together, to have the different generations of the Julias and the different attitudes. And I think Julia does come out as the one you want to root for. Well, thank you all for coming. Fortunately, you didn't have to get through the snow.